You spent 300 hours last month inside 4 walls you don't own. You watched numbers move through a screen that doesn't belong to you. Then Friday arrived and a notification told you that you got paid. For exactly 12 seconds, you felt rich. By Monday morning, 70% of that money was already spoken for. Rent took the first bite. The car payment came next. The credit card minimum swallowed another chunk. The phone bill, the insurance, the subscriptions you forgot you signed up for. Before you even touched the money, it was gone. And somehow, despite working more hours than your grandparents ever did, you are broke again. This is not bad luck. This is not poor planning. This is the oldest trap in the economic playbook. And you walked into it the moment you believed that a paycheck equals freedom. Let me take you back to a time before direct deposits and tax withholdings. Ancient Rome, the empire that built roads across continents and aqueducts that still stand today. But the men who built those roads were not paid in the way you think. They received a daily ration of salt and grain, just enough to survive until the next day, just enough to keep them strong enough to work, not enough to save, not enough to leave. The Latin word for this arrangement was salarium. You know it today as salary. The Romans understood something that modern corporations have perfected. If you give a worker exactly what they need to survive, they will return tomorrow. They have no choice. The salt runs out. The grain runs out. The worker returns. Every single day. For decades. Until their body breaks down and the empire replaces them with the next desperate man in line. This brings us to stage 1. The promise of security. Every economic trap in history begins with a seductive offer. Work for me and you will never go hungry. Pledge your labor and I will protect you. Sign this contract and your family will have shelter. The Roman soldier was told he would earn glory and land. The medieval serf was told he would be safe from bandits if he worked the Lord's fields. The factory worker in Manchester was told that a steady wage was better than the uncertainty of farming. And you were told that a salaried position with benefits was the mark of success. The language changes. The trap remains identical. Stage 2 arrives quietly. You accept the offer. You show up on Monday. You learn the systems, the passwords, the procedures. You meet your manager, your team, your responsibilities. The first paycheck hits your account and it feels good. It feels real. You worked and someone paid you. This is how it is supposed to work. Except you don't notice what is happening to your mind. You stop thinking about other ways to make money. You stop imagining what you could build if you had time. Your brain begins to calculate everything in units of paychecks. That vacation cost 2 paychecks. That car cost 18 paychecks. That medical emergency cost 6 paychecks. Your entire life is now measured in hours traded for dollars, and the exchange rate is controlled by someone else. But here is the part they don't teach you in school. Stage 3 is when the system locks. You get used to a certain lifestyle. You rent an apartment that costs 40% of your income because everywhere cheaper is too far from work or too dangerous or too small. You finance a car because you need it to get to the job that pays for the car. You start using credit cards to smooth out the gaps between paychecks, not for luxuries, for groceries, for gas, for the electric bill that came early this month. And now you are not just working for your salary. You are working to service the debt you took on because your salary was not enough. The Romans called this nexum, debt bondage. The modern term is revolving credit. Same chain, nicer name. Stage 4 is the realization. You sit down one night and you run the numbers. You make $50,000 a year. After taxes, it is $38,000. That is $3,100 per month. Rent is $1,400. Car payment is $400. Insurance is $300. Student loans are $250. Credit card minimums are $200. Utilities are $150. Phone is $80. Internet is $70. Subscriptions are $60. That is $2,910. You have $190 left for food, gas, clothing, and any emergency that might come. And you work 40 to 50 hours a week for this privilege. Your grandmother worked 30 hours a week in a factory and owned her home by age 35. You work 50 hours in an air-conditioned office and you will never own anything. This is where the system turns deadly, because now you are trapped by something worse than chains. You are trapped by mathematics. Even if you wanted to quit, you cannot. You have $1,200 in your checking account. Rent is due in 6 days. If you quit your job today, you will be homeless in 3 weeks. You cannot take a month off to learn a new skill. You cannot take a risk on a business idea. You cannot move to a cheaper city because you don't have the cash for a security deposit, and first month is rent. Every door that might lead to freedom requires money, and the only way you know how to get money is to show up on Monday morning and trade more hours for dollars that are already spent before you earn them. The architects of this system knew exactly what they were doing. In 1863, a British economist named William Stanley Jevons published a theory that still governs your life. He argued that the purpose of wages is not to enrich the worker. The purpose is to keep the worker at subsistence level, just comfortable enough not to rebel, just uncomfortable enough to keep working. He called it the iron law of wages. Employers will always pay the minimum amount required to keep workers alive and productive, not a penny more. If they pay too little, workers die or leave. If they pay too much, workers gain independence and bargaining power. The perfect wage is the one that keeps you returning every Monday for the next 40 years. Stage 5 is the breaking point. You start to notice that your co-workers who have been there for 15 years are only making 15% more than you. You realize that annual raises of 3% do not even keep up with inflation. You understand that your salary is not climbing a ladder. It is running on a treadmill. The company dangles promotions and titles and corner offices, but the math barely changes. A senior analyst makes $65,000. A manager makes $78,000. A director makes $95,000. All of them have mortgages. All of them have car payments. All of them have credit card debt. The number in the paycheck gets bigger, but the cage stays the same size. Once you sign that paper, the clock starts ticking against you. Because inflation is not an accident. It is a policy. Every year, the cost of rent increases by 4%. The cost of healthcare increases by 6%. The cost of education increases by 8%. But your salary, if you are lucky, increases by 3%. Which means that every single year, you are getting poorer in real terms. You are working the same hours, producing the same value, but your paycheck buys less. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system working exactly as designed. A worker who gains wealth gains options. A worker with options can say no. The entire architecture of modern employment is built to make sure you never have enough wealth to say no. Let me show you what this looks like in the real world. You're 25 years old and you get your first real job, $45,000 a year. You feel like you made it. You rent a decent apartment. You buy a used car. You go out on weekends. Life is good. 10 years pass. You are 35 now. You got promoted twice. You make $62,000 a year, 38% more than you made at 25. You should feel rich, but you don't, because now you have a spouse, you have a kid, you have a bigger apartment, you have a newer car, and you have daycare costs, you have medical bills, you have a storage unit full of things you don't use. And somehow, you have less money in your savings account now than you did when you were 25 and making $45,000. The paycheck grew, but the leash grew with it. This brings us to stage 6, the moment you realize you are not building wealth. You are renting your own life. Every possession you have is financed. Your car, your furniture, your phone, even your education was financed. And you are still paying for it 15 years later. You don't own your home. You don't own your transportation. You don't own your future. What you own is a series of payment plans that require you to keep working until you are 65. And here is the cruelest joke of all. By the time you are 65 and you finally stop working, your body is broken. Your knees hurt. Your back hurts. Your eyes are failing. You spent 40 years trading health for wealth and now you have neither. The Romans understood this cycle perfectly. They paid their soldiers in salt and promises of land. Most soldiers died before they could claim the land. The ones who survived were too old and damaged to farm it. But the promise kept them marching. The promise kept them loyal. The promise kept them from asking why the generals and senators lived in marble villas while the soldiers slept in tents. The modern equivalent is your retirement account. Work for 40 years and you can retire in comfort. except the average retirement account has $47,000 in it. That will last you 4 years if you are lucky. 6 years if you live in a cheap state and never get sick. Then what? You are 71 years old with no money and no energy and a system that has already extracted everything you had to give. But here is what they really don't want you to understand. The paycheck is not designed to free you. It is designed to pace you. Think about a hamster wheel. If the wheel spins too fast, the hamster flies off. If the wheel spins too slow, the hamster stops running. The perfect speed is the one that keeps the hamster running forever without realizing it is going nowhere. Your paycheck is that perfect speed, big enough to keep you showing up, small enough to keep you desperate. You are not climbing, you are spinning, and every year the wheel spins a little faster while your legs get a little weaker. The factory owners of the Industrial Revolution discovered this by accident. When they paid workers by the day, workers would earn enough for a week and then disappear. They would go drink. They would go rest. They would go spend time with their families. The factory sat empty. Production stopped. Profits fell. So the owners invented a new system. The weekly wage. Pay the workers just enough to survive 1 week. Make them return every Monday. Then every paycheck becomes a leash with a 7-day chain. You can wander, but not far. You can rest, but not long. And you can never, ever leave. This is not a conspiracy. This is a business model. Every corporation in the world has a department dedicated to calculating the minimum amount they can pay you while keeping you productive. They call it compensation analysis. They study your cost of living. They study your debt levels. They study how much financial pressure you can take before you break or quit, and they price your labor right at that edge. Not because they are evil, because they are rational. A company that pays more than necessary loses profit. A company that pays less than necessary loses workers. The perfect wage is the one that keeps you trapped. The evidence is everywhere once you see it. Why does your raise always come with more responsibility? Because they are not rewarding you. They are recalibrating the leash. You got better at your job, so you produce more value, so they need to pay you slightly more to keep you from leaving. But they also add more work to make sure the math stays in their favor. Why does your health insurance cost more every year even though your salary barely increases? Because the goal is not to keep you healthy. The goal is to keep you employed. A worker who can afford to quit is a worker who has too much bargaining power. A worker with a sick child and expensive insulin is a worker who will accept anything. Let me tell you what happened to your grandfather. He worked at a steel mill for 35 years. He bought a house at 28. He owned 2 cars by 35. He sent 3 kids to college. He retired at 60 with a pension that paid 70% of his salary for the rest of his life. He died at 79 with money in the bank. Let me tell you what is happening to you. You have worked for 12 years. You rent an apartment. You finance 1 car. You have $60,000 in student debt. You have $4,000 in your retirement account. If you get sick, you go bankrupt. If you lose your job, you are homeless in 2 months. You will work until you are 70. You will have no pension. You will have no inheritance to leave your children. And you make more money on paper than your grandfather ever did. This is the paycheck illusion. The number goes up, but the value goes down. The title gets fancier, but the freedom gets smaller. You are earning more than your parents and living worse than your grandparents. And the system calls this progress. They point to the bigger number and tell you that you are doing better. They don't mention that the bigger number buys less. They don't mention that your grandfather worked 40 hours a week and you work 55 when you count the emails at night and the weekend projects. They don't mention that he came home to a family and you come home to a laptop.